Hello. It feels nice being lowered to the ground and like I can see everyone at the same level. It feels nice. Welcome to Woven today. We are so glad that you are here. It is getting close to summertime, warming up, although it's going to rain a crap ton this week, so everyone have fun with that. Today, I am talking with the ever wonderful Sarah McAfee about being queer and Christian, so that'll be a fun conversation for us. And then stay tuned, because next week I'm going to have that conversation with Michelle Roller. So that'll be a lot of fun. So we're glad to have you all here. I lost my train of thought. So wow, that doesn't normally happen to me. So I'm just going to pivot to the welcome, because I lost that announcement. And if it comes back to me, I'll say it after this. So we just want to say a very special welcome to you, regardless of your race, your gender, your socioeconomic status, your queer identity, your views of the Bible or lack thereof views of the Bible, your views of culture, and also regardless of where your headspace is, whether you're feeling in your body and present or if you're not. You belong here just as you are, where you are. And we just want to say welcome today. Daniel is here with us, going to lead us through some fun poetry stuff, and I'm really glad I'm not doing this part, so take it away.
Why, thank you. So first, I want to say Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers here and online. And I also want to say Happy Mother's Day to all who are also struggling with either having a mother and having a tough relationship with her, or not having a mother, or having a mother who's passed away. I know this day can be really tough. This day is really tough for me. I will be very vulnerable now, but I won't go into details, of course. But if today is tough for you, if you are a mother who doesn't have contact with children, I see you. It's okay for this day to be a day of sadness and celebration. So with that kind of out of the way, we are once again going to do poetry. Woo! So I made a decision that of the 6 canvases, we're only going to do words for 3. So last time we did this, I think we did this on resurrection. This time, we're doing it on repair. Had to double check myself there. So I'm going to do the same of pass around a couple of baskets, take some pieces of paper. There's pens in the baskets as well. Write down what you think when you hear the word repair. How does it feel to you? What memories does it bring up? What colors or shapes do you associate with repair? And just write one word per paper. And then we'll write a poem together. I love it. Or multiple poems together. now, you've kind of already done this kind of naturally, but find people around you and get into a group. I think we could do 3 groups or 2 groups. It's up to you all. But I'm going to mix up the words that I have, and we'll go from there. gentle 1-minute warning. A gentle 1-minute warning. So finish up your poems and stick them to the paper.
We literally beat you. 16. So 1 minute. We did 16 words.
Yeah, we did. We made it work.
Oh, never mind. We did.
Yes, please. Just hand it to me at the end.
You know, we can go off the sides, can't we?
I'm so glad I have a comfortable chair. Oh, bless you. Oh, there you go. You know, I mean, I got to embrace the queerness in this. Oh,
I'm working up the courage.
don't worry, I have enough for all of us.
Yes, we took off the white shirt.
I would be too. They freak me out so much. That's right. Where do you
That was
see
fast.
economy? That's economy. Oh, okay. I know, right? I can't do Greek.
If I had money right now, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
Yeah. Yeah. I just thought that was you at first. That's what it looks like to me.
All right, let's wrap up our poems. Thank you all so much for participating in an activity that can expand our brains and the way we think and we view the world and each other and thoughts and think about things like repair, which is kind of a hard word to think about in today's culture, unfortunately, repairing things. But we're going to transition to a time where we're going to continue our conversation about being queer and Christian, and there's no better person to talk about that with than Sarah McAfee. So just to totally make you feel comfortable and totally diffused, like this is just, I know, but just think of this as like when we talk on the phone, you know, no ideas are bad. We just
So
throw it all out
Logan
there.
and I talk on the phone for like 2.5 hours at a time. It's mind-boggling, but it's great. So
Yeah.
we're gonna let you listen into our phone conversation.
Right, or as Charlotte had dinner with us, so how we go
Yes.
in any normal setting. So I want to start because I'm really interested in this idea because you studied history and you know a lot more about history than I do. Kind of your understanding of history of the church and its kind of relationship with the queer community, or probably better phrase,
The lack
thereof. Yes, so I'll let you take that away.
Yeah, I mean, when I was growing up in the Episcopal Church, I didn't know anybody but straight white people. So no people of color, no queer people. And I think, you know, I was looking back because you had asked this question before, and so different times, like the Roman Empire, had a relationship with the church, and during a certain period, Christianity was an official religion. And then in the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church buddied up with the state, and they had that
Yeah.
relationship. But historically, in my reading and in my personal experience, queers have never belonged in the church or been accepted.
Yeah, most of the history of writing, it's always been a real secrecy thing, which is a real
Yeah.
tragedy,
Yes.
especially in relationship with church cultures. But you brought up something that's important, and obviously I think a lot of us who care about spirituality in any way, shape, or form are thinking about is we have a new pope. And that is interesting, especially with
Yes.
the Catholic Church's history, especially in politics. So there's kind of this twofold dynamic happening. So we have a new pope, and we would probably all agree that although Pope Francis in many ways was very conservative, because there's just part of religion that's going to be tricky, he definitely, as far as marginalized people, moved the needle really far. I'm reminded of a video I watched of him where this kid was terrified. He had the opportunity to ask the Pope a question. And he was too scared, and the parishioner was trying to get him to ask the question, and he was too scared. And the Pope said, "Will you whisper it in my ear?" And he invited the kid up to whisper it in his ear, and then he ended up asking the kid's permission to share his question, because the Pope thought it was really a profound question to be asked. And the kid asked, "My dad was an atheist, but he made sure all 4 of us kids got baptized, and he died recently. Is my dad in heaven?"
Mm.
And the Pope Francis gave this brilliant answer of, why would God separate any child from their family in a long term, right? So in those types of conversations, the needle was moved. He was more willing to go outside of the tradition, which is really meaningful, because another big thing that's been changing historically, and you've really inserted yourself in this since knowing me and other people, is deconstruction is a really popular commodity, is what I'm going to use. And probably because it's a reaction to having faith without having to go full atheist, right? Because in the 90s, atheism was really on the rise in a lot of ways. And it was kind of, people felt like religion wasn't going to budge on so many things, so we got to go pure atheist humanist. Do you think that the things that I just described, do you think that they're a help or a hurt for the queer community? Maybe the answer is both, but I'll see what you think.
Well, first of all, from my viewpoint, all religion is conservative. So we're coming from a base of conservatism. This is a new experience in this particular Presbyterian church, that we actually want to do real social justice, not just lip service.
Right.
And my views on deconstruction are, isn't that what we should be doing most of the time?
Right, shouldn't we be doing that with history, is what you're saying?
Well, and just deconstructing ideas, to my way of thinking, is constantly reevaluating what we think, and maybe it needs to change, because you know me, and in my lifetime, I'm going to be studying and learning and changing until I'm 104. That's the death date, by the way, 104.
She's calling it now. So
I've been saying for years, I'm dying when I'm 104.
Well, that is interesting, right? Because I think most of us in this room would agree, let's just throw this out, our politics have changed a lot from 5 years ago, right? Even post a pandemic. Let alone our views on church and how we do community life. I would say that they evolve, maybe not even subtly. Some things for sure evolve subtly, but some things evolve pretty largely.
Well, and if you stay wedded to whatever religious dictums, and I will point out the Bible as being a place where we keep coming back to, that's sort of frozen in time, shall we say?
Yeah.
Which doesn't give anybody permission to think outside the box or to change and say that queer people are standing right alongside of straight people.
That's right. Yeah, we were talking about that a little bit in Sunday school today, and I didn't even know it was going to get talked about. It just kind of happens this way.
It
often
does.
is we were talking about the challenge of really, Brian McLaren, we're reading this book by Brian McLaren, and he's a great thought thinker. But he was painting this picture about images in the text that, in his view, the writers were certainly trying to articulate. Whether they really happened or not is out for interpretation. I don't think they really happened, but whatever. He was painting this picture of that to the culture, that would mean something of Jesus' day.
Yes.
And then we got into the conversation of, that's the con, right, of making something sacred and holding on to it, is we evolve out of that
stuck
culture.
with it.
And you are kind of trapped in it. And it's a limit, because it was a culture for a period of time. It was meant to articulate a point, and especially because we were talking about, I think it was Matthew, one of the synoptic gospels, that it had its own target audience, and so that's really limiting. And so it makes it hard, because it doesn't answer everything. But I did present this idea that I think is helpful, is I think it's a beautiful picture, though, of like Jesus leaving, dying, rising, resurrection, whatever your views on that are, whether you think it's metaphorical or literal, it doesn't really matter because this applies. The point is that God's with you regardless of your culture and in every culture and helping us evolve and move forward in culture. So what I'm reckoning with and what you and I are questioning now is that means God's with queer culture. And that means queers don't just have to show up to straight culture. And history helps us in all other spheres, but religion's tricky, right? Because we have a lot of time to look back on, but unfortunately when we look back on history of church, it's moved on some things, but not a lot. It holds tighter to things than other
Well, and
forms.
religiously and culturally, it seems to me through the ages that we've wanted to have this unifying thread through things.
That's right.
And if you only want to be in unity, I mean, if you all want to be in lockstep, so I grew up in the 1950s, and
What a time to be alive.
oh my God. But so my church experience was we all dressed alike,
Yeah.
and we all went into church. Well, I was
Not with gay dinosaurs.
nope, we didn't do those. We did hats and white gloves if you were a woman.
Yeah.
And there were only two sexes, so get that.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have been allowed to wear what I'm wearing today at all.
No, you wouldn't. But it seems to me that as we've moved through time, or at least through my lifetime, that we're now we're branching out. And that was a lot of what happened in the 60s when we started, my generation started pushing back against, it's that song about the ticky-tacky little boxes that we all lived in neighborhoods. Everything was sort of monoculture. And then my generation began, well, we were protesting the war, of course, but we were also protesting kind of that monoculture sort of thing. Everybody's doing the same thing and dressing the same way. And now then I love it because we've got all sorts of different people and things going on.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? So there's a couple of things to circle in there, and you danced around two important themes, and I don't want to ignore the clothes
Alrighty.
piece, but I'm going to go to the war piece first, because I think this is where Christianity has put itself firmly in a trap and separated itself is in the terms of war. And part of what we were talking about today, and I really hate this subject, so I really don't like mentioning this, but I think it's healthy for this conversation, is the justification for war so often is, well, Jesus came back the first time as this peaceful person, but when he comes back the second time, it's violence. He's flipping the script, so we get to partner with that mentality now, right? Like that's what was out there in my upbringing. That's the dogma that
Never
dictated.
heard that.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So it's bullshit. Is all it is. Is all
You
I'm
bet.
saying. Like it's just bullshit. So I just want to say that. But it's interesting, right? Because you still see a partnering with specifically war efforts within the church, and that's been going on for a really long time. Another thing, historically, that's where Pope Francis again kind of broke, because I don't know if people know this, is a fun fact. He called the Catholic Church in Gaza every day
I
to
thought
make
that was
sure
beautiful.
those people were
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
and was trying to get them aid and support, because he fundamentally disagreed with what the Israeli government was doing. Amen. And he really just disagreed because he just didn't think it cared enough for marginalized people. And so it is interesting in spiritual culture, there is slowly, and the problem is this, right, is I feel like we're like at the start of the start of the start of the start of the start. I don't even know that it's started yet. Of people thinking differently about it. And I do think that deconstruction thing has kind of paved way for people to think differently about people in the margins and people who are, maybe we shouldn't support efforts that just leave people in rubble under their homes. and maybe we should actually be on the forefront of making sure that those people have aid and basic human needs and rights. And the church has kind of lost its way in that. You know, a lot of churches struggle to even know how to support their own community. I told John this story. I don't even think I told you this. So this was 8 or 9 years ago. My AC went out, and please, and I'll just tell you what it cost. It cost $5,000. So I asked the church I was going to at the time for $500. I had to basically disclose every ounce of my financials to get $500. They want to know who was living with me, how much they were contributing to my rent, and I'm like, that's none of your fucking business.
It's
Why are you
control
asking me
issues.
this? Yeah. And so, you know, so it's funny, right? So I attend a space, and this was a space that John and Michelle and others went to that loved people pretty well. And they wanted to know every little detail to get, to give me $500. And I thought that was,
But churches want you to pass tests.
yeah.
And they want you to be worthy of something.
Mm-hmm.
They want you to follow the guidelines that they've set out.
Mm-hmm.
And that, to me, is stupid.
Yeah, and that circles into where we're going, right? How do you follow the guidelines and welcome in a culture that has never been in, which is for queer people? So you don't know their culture to
Sure,
set
okay.
the guidelines. And so right now, the best churches can do is, well, all are welcome, just as you are. We affirm you as you are. And I feel that in this space, genuinely, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But I think that that's only,
Oh, that's the beginning.
yeah.
Step one.
So from your opinion, because we
Yes.
all know this is going to be messy, this is going to be hard, and we all know that, and I just put the preface out there, this is things Sarah and I talk about on the phone, we can change our minds still in an hour, even though we're saying it on a microphone.
What I say now lasts for 5 minutes. I may change.
Yeah. So how do you think this community, which I genuinely think really invites all people in, I do, but how does it help move that needle forward?
Yeah, I was so interested in John talking about bicultural, and I got to thinking, what's that going to look like? I don't know. I'm like John. I have no answers. I'm just going to talk about stuff.
Me neither, and I'm part of the bicultural conversation, and I don't know either.
I feel so validated by John's stance. It's like, yeah, I'd like to pose these questions, but I have no answers.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that there maybe is some insight, like with Pope Francis and others in history, that
Yes.
can maybe give us some key indicators,
Yes.
right? Because the Catholic Church under Pope Francis was by no stretch perfect. Actually, I wouldn't even call it good.
Right.
But progress was made, right?
Yeah.
So is there maybe something from history where we can continue to make progress?
Yeah, so my personal opinion is that it's changing a culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that takes a lot of talking.
Right.
It really does. It takes people talking about stuff and asking questions. We do that really well at this church in both of our services, both of our
Right.
congregations. But because I'm convinced, the human brain can be rewired so that it believes different things. And how does that happen? By being exposed to different things and having that conversation maybe over and over again and asking questions from different directions until you've created a different culture. And it takes a long, long time. What the new Pope did, which I thought was really, if this was true, which I thought was genius, is that he couldn't change the church's stance on abortion or anything like that. The big questions.
Yeah,
The Catholic Church is not there.
Not even
But
close.
what he did was he just stuffed a bunch of cardinals that think like he does into
The bishop.
Really, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so if you bring together a lot of people that are sort of like-minded, and we've got that here, and keep having this conversation, what I see is with John's Affirming Leaders group, so then you take our conversation here and what we're talking about, and we get other like-minded people, and we start having this conversation out in the community. And I think this is what's going to make change. Maybe not in my lifetime, although I will be here till I'm 104.
That's
We'll
right.
see.
That's
Yep.
right. So I want to put the rub for our space in this room, and this is where I always feel the challenge. For the record, this was on the notes, so Sarah knows about this.
Good.
We have a lot of conversations in progressive culture about, do we rebuild, start new, or do we use the same old forms? Because, I'm not convinced, I'm not saying I'm right, but I'm not convinced using the same house is going to work. I don't know. But what I do know is this: I don't want to just be invited to the table as a queer person.
Right.
I want to question the very table itself and whether that's right at
Yes.
all. Because that's
Yes.
really the root of where I don't think any space is starting very well, is we're not actually questioning the table and the history. And that's not saying there's not good in it. I do. I think there's a ton of good in it.
Yeah.
But it's not exclusively good, just like it's not exclusively bad. And we are going to have to do some work on figuring out how we do those things. And I struggled there in this space, right? Because this is also still firmed in a tradition, just happens to be a tradition that I am okay with. But it's firmed in a tradition, so literally becoming bicultural in this way becomes challenging. And correct me if I'm wrong, I don't see a lot of historical success with this. I think it's possible, but I don't know that we have much to gauge upon what worked and what didn't.
Well, but we're all going to start with what has historically been here,
Mm-hmm.
because it's just what we've got.
Right.
And
That's
the
right.
language that we've got. So we've got the table, if we
Yeah.
can use this as an example.
Yeah, if we do, we have a table
The
right here.
the table will be here. And we know this, we all know this because we've used this before. It's the people that we ask to be around the table, and that's one of the challenges with this current administration, is that they're going into scarcity and disinviting people
Right.
to a conversation. And if you want to really make change, then, well, and the other thing is, you have to be open and flexible about what you're talking about. So you have to be willing to give up things
Yeah.
in order to get to something new that you're building. Let's say it's a straight community building with the queer community, trying to be bicultural. So we're going to bring our stuff.
Right.
Some of it will be the same stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody, and mostly, I guess this is my feeling, mostly because the straight community or any majority community that you're talking about has the floor,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak. Okay, now we got more furniture in here.
Yeah. At least we have an actual floor. I'm with you.
No kidding. But, the people who've had control or power
Yeah.
really, I think, need to be very receptive, at least listening to what's being introduced to them, or
Right.
we don't. And that's where the form doesn't have to be so constricting.
Right. I think the other part too is, and when I say this, she won't believe me, so I
don't.
just want to say this. You have inserted yourself, though, in queer community at a level that I'm not used to people saying yes to doing. I'm not. And so as a queer person, someone who comes into my space just absorbs all the shit that I'm involved in. 'Cause it can
My
be
pleasure, Logan.
Yeah. and you constantly spend, because it's not just giving someone else a microphone. It is about
right.
actually
Right.
being brave enough and engaging in someone else's space and caring. And you somehow do this balance, and I don't know how this is going to work in a broader scale. I never feel like I have to educate you.
Wow.
I just feel like you're
Because I
engaged
feel
with me.
stupid a lot of times.
Why did you say that? That's not true,
Just
for the
saying.
record. But what I'm learning is that engagement goes a long way for people, and
Yeah.
people feeling like
Yeah.
people feeling seen, validated, and cared for.
Yeah.
You know, I was going to say this for the end, but I'm going to say it now, since I'm on a compliment tour.
Keep it up, buddy. I'm liking it.
Yeah, so one of the things I love about Sarah, so I've been obsessed with this song by Katie Gilvan called The Baton. I feel like, though, for what you've paved the way in life, I feel like you're handing me a baton in the way, and I get to go and continue to make progress. And that's the closest to biculture I think I've ever felt, is like someone who identifies as a straight woman who's advocated for change and positivity and thing. I actually feel like I'm being handed it in that way, and that's part of what keeps me here as an invitation, even though this community is in no way, shape, or form fully bicultural at all. We barely started talking about it. Yeah, I felt that where I felt invited into something and like I'm handed a baton and can continue something. I don't even know what that'll look like, but that's really how I personally
So I've conducted most of my life by, so if I get excited about something, so I got excited about knowing you and Andrew, and so, and I got excited about going to Sunday school with Erica when I met her at Glean.
Yeah.
And so my modus operandi is if I think you're interesting, I'm just going to be part of your life.
Yeah. Same. So this is probably why Sarah and I are friends, because I actually do the same thing. It's like, if you're interesting and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to
I
insert myself
follow
there.
people into their interests. I did this with my son. Every time he got interested in something, computers, in 1983, I was like, oh my God. But I learned computers because I wanted to be
That's right.
with Jeff. So, yeah.
Yeah, we've kind of danced around this subject, and we talked about this a little bit with Charlotte on Wednesday. Is ideology and the way we think about things, are we spinning too much airwaves on that, do you think? I'm curious about this.
Okay, my current stance for at least 5 minutes is if you choose ideology over people, you're probably on the wrong path. You can believe things, but ideology to me is like this fixed set of values that you have to cleave to.
Right.
And the way it's getting in the way of the world now is that people are following their ideology and forgetting that they're harming people.
That's really well said. Yeah, and some of the ways that I've helped myself with like biblical narratives is I actually think of them in forms of narratives instead of ideology. And so I think all of the Bible is what it's supposed to do is in some way, and this breaks down because the Bible is just such a problematic book, is it's supposed to be about covenantal relationship between God and people and cultures. And again, I think a lot of it's myth, sorry to the people who don't think that
I
way,
agree.
but it really just helps me have a better, healthier view of God if I just leave some of that in myth, because myth can still tell us a lot, and I think a lot of it was inspired by the literature of its time that we just don't get, plain and simple. We don't get it.
So the funny thing about this talk today is that you labeled it queer and Christian. I'm neither one. I don't call myself a Christian. So.
Yeah, so one of our side conversations that Sarah and I often have, and I have probably with everyone, is, do you call yourself Christian or not? So my experiment here, and part of the reason I want to talk to you is it's like, can I be queer and Christian? Because I also don't classify myself as a Christian. So I'm like, well, I'm going to talk to Sarah in the midweek. That'll help me feel safer because she'll give me a lot to lean on. But I will say that also put a little bit of the onus on me to bring some of the biblical stuff. So I had to do that prep work instead of expecting that on you. So, so that's good for me to think about things more healthy than I like to, since I am a director in a church. That's
How'd that happen?
yeah, what an oxymoron.
John Roller comes to mind.
Yeah, he does. But with these this idea of God really being connected to people, I was thinking about when you were talking about the 60s, and it was Tawana Roller who brought this up to me. She was reading Martin Luther King Jr.'s thoughts on Jeremiah, and I'm like, in my mind, I thought,
sounds about right.
dang, I hate that book. I mean, I don't even know. And I would read MLK stuff all the day.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I don't know that I don't want to read anything from Jeremiah. Like, we did get that heart's deceitful and wicked that's being weaponized from that book of the Bible. That's not good. So, because like that's a lot what queer people were told, on
Sure.
a Not Funny
Yeah.
is like, I think about this life, well, the heart's deceitful. You got to follow God instead of thinking about God actually wanting to be for people in a covenantal love kind of way.
Yeah.
That is interesting. But what I found about that, what I love about that story is this, is like, he was taking the scripture and applying it to his protests and his work. Well, how beautiful, right? If he can make those parallels, that's pretty cool. That feels harder for the queer community. So like there's this new thought out there in the progressive space called queer reading the Bible, which is think of some of these stories and some of these relationships and treat them as actually queer, and it doesn't matter if they're queer or not. You actually just read the Bible queerly so you can actually see love differently than your own biased worldview. And so that's kind of the thing that people are trying with the Bible to bring queer people in. It's a little scary to me.
I'm sure.
It's actually a little terrifying, but I like the idea as a moving forward place. What do you? Because you have a leadership role in this community, whether you like
keep telling me.
You do. You sit on the same committee that I sit on.
Okay.
How do you think we can bring forward more queer-centric ideas to this space? Because this is hard, and I understand that.
Yeah. Well, you have to give the queer community a platform, and you have to be willing to listen. I'm still back at that thing where showing up and being present and having those conversations is how we make things happen. But I'm also back to the whole thing of I have no clue.
Yeah, you're bringing in an active listening piece,
Yes.
though, in your conversation, which is you're really good at that, but that's not everyone's
I know.
gifting. You're incredibly
know.
good at active listening.
Okay.
I say this because in my corporate job, we have to coach people on like, hey, you were on that phone call. Did you hear what that person told you? Or did you keep talking? And they always know the answer.
Yeah.
Well, I was afraid they were going to say, I'm like, but did they say that? Did they say that thing you were afraid of?
Yeah.
And so a lot of times we keep talking because we're afraid
Well,
of what that person will say.
and I just love to talk. So
Me too.
the active listening piece is, so my son and I are incredibly close, and we really like to do life together, and we really like to progress in life and learn. And the piece, and Michelle Roller's really good at this, being curious.
Yeah.
And
Tattooed on my arm.
yeah, but if you stay in curiosity, then when you're listening to something, because this is what I love about talking to most of the people in this church, when I talk to you, especially for 2.5 hours on the phone,
That's right.
we stay there because what you say is engaging to me. And
You throw out just as many profound ideas as me. I do not want the misdemeanor like I'm coming up with all this great stuff and she's just listening. That's not how our phone calls work.
okay.
I just wanted that out there. What you mean is our conversations really keep your brain engaged and
Yes.
going, and you come up with ideas.
Yes, because if somebody is helping me, okay, it's back to me again.
Yeah.
But if somebody's helping me to generate a new idea in my brain, I'm all there.
That's right.
I am all there because that is exciting to me, is together discovering something that's new
That's right.
or that's expanded, because you and I expand ideas all the time.
Yeah, that's right. One final thing. I feel like Ezra Klein here, and I feel like I should ask you for 3 books, but I'm going to refrain.
I could give you 3 books.
But on a serious note, even if it's a microdose of hope, like it's not a big one, if you can't
Yeah.
do any of that, that's okay. What's a hope you have for this space, this community, this space that we call Beaumont, both the 11 and the 3:30 service?
It's the people. It's the fact that this particular community is willing to have conversations and to really listen, and that they don't knee-jerk the pushback. They really, even the stuff that, I mean, I've seen some of my friends sit and just go, no, that's not ever gonna, I can't do that. But it's not outright rejection. They're still listening.
That's
and we're
right.
still having a conversation.
That's
so,
right.
yeah.
You know, that's a great place to end it, because one of the beautiful things is, in the space that I feel in, is from the Lord of the Rings book, is not all those who wander are lost. We're just wandering. And this conversation is continually helpful, because you do talk to me every week, and that makes my life so much
We
easier.
wander a
And you
lot.
give me, just wondering and finding our place and presentness in the world and in each other, as we, I would say, based upon the political climate, that all of us are wondering a little bit, not knowing where things will land. So thank you, Sarah. Thank you for your hope. You are so delightful. Yay. My advice to everyone is just get to know Sarah more. And I'm going to close us in a prayer that's so beautiful. This is a prayer for beauty in the mundane. Wow, I need this so much. I love this prayer. God of every beautiful thing, make us people of wonder. Show us how to hold onto nuance and vision when our souls become addicted to pain, to the unlovely. It is far easier to see the gloom and decay. So often it sings a louder song. Attune our hearts to the good still stirring in our midst. Not that we would give ourselves to toxic positivity or neglect the pain of the world, but that we would be people capable of existing in the tension. Grant us habits of sacred pause. Let us marvel not just at the grand or majestic, but beauty's name etched into every ordinary moment. Let the mundane swell with a mystery that makes us breathe deeper still. And by this, may we be sustained and kept from despair. Amen. And we will see you all next week.
You did so good, Sarah.